think the current area of competition and confrontation and conflict with China will outlast the Trump administration. Some of the issues, particularly around technology, will be with us for years to come.
China is building its own internet focused on very different values. And it's now exporting their vision of the internet to other countries.
我们华为正经历一个美国第三轮制裁的困难时期。
Sure, other countries engage in industrial espionage, but no one does it on the scale of China.
The sparring between the United States and China has taken a new twist, with student visas now in the firing line.
你们国家跟国家打仗，不要再让我们学生好无辜呀。
I think being a Chinese person in America, especially this year with the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of that makes me feel or relate to how it might be similar to how Muslims and brown people felt after 9/11. There is a white supremacist, nativist, xenophobic atmosphere that has been inflamed.
A new report that ties the Chinese government to dozens of serious cyber attacks on U.S. banks, government agencies, and other critical industries.
Tonight, the FBI and federal cybersecurity agents are warning that hackers linked to the Chinese government are trying to steal research on coronavirus vaccines and therapies.
China is calling the allegations groundless.
Since the tension in Ladakh escalated, there has been a mega surge in Chinese-sponsored cyber attacks for India, from banks to infrastructure sectors to smartphone companies.
China is, of course, denying it had anything to do with the data breach.
Well, I guess it's one thing for the U.S. government to say, well, look, this is what is happening to us, etc. But it's not as if the U.S. government is the innocent party in this, is it?
I've been tracking this kind of Chinese activity for about 25 years, when I was in the government and now that I'm outside. If you were to look at any given moment, there might be between half a dozen and a dozen of these major Chinese collection efforts underway at any given time against a range of targets in the US and in other countries. So the Chinese have long focused on international organizations, human rights organizations, and the US defense industry, where they are eager to steal military technology and have had some success in the past. The first is, of course, that they can use it to advance their own technology. More importantly, they understand how US weapons work. So they know the range, the payload, all that kind of stuff. And it's possible that they have interfered with the software that operates these weapons. So you get into the weapon system, like the F-35. The F-35, probably a third of the cost is software. It's really a flying computer, people say that. And if you interfere with the software, the aircraft can't fly, right? So wouldn't that be a good target? Suppose during a conflict, you have 10 airplanes and I can turn off 6 of them.
China's rampant theft of intellectual property is real, and that it's not just a problem for the particular company affected, because that capacity to invest and create and protect those property rights underpins the entire innovation economy that we have here in the United States.
IP theft is, of course, age-old. The oldest known recognition of IP rights came thousands of years ago in ancient Greece. The Persian rulers of Samarkand stole the secret of papermaking from the Chinese on the ancient Silk Road. And more recently, the British stole the secret of processing tea leaves from the Chinese, a secret that was pivotal to the empire of the East India Company. Industrial espionage is as old as industry itself.
Sure, other countries engage in industrial espionage, but no one does it on the scale of China. No one does it against as many countries and as many targets. The difference between now and the cyber age and the industrial age is that whereas in the 19th century, maybe you could steal a book, now you can steal the entire library.
很多美剧，然后很向往美国的生活，然后我就很坚持的跟我爸妈说，我想来美国学习，我觉得这个国家会给我，不一样的感觉。
家长有和之前高中的老师沟通过，然后家人可能让我想接受更好一点的教育吧，然后就把我送过来了。
我感觉美国，我向往的东西比较多一点，像 NBA 啦，包括其他的一些东西。
The majority of Chinese students cover the full cost of an American university education themselves, effectively subsidizing the education of their American peers. Professor Ronald McMullen does a little experiment at the beginning of every school year to illustrate this point.
I often, on the first day of class in most semesters, will pass around a Ziploc bag full of money. And it contains this year $105 and some change. And I tell my students, every time we have a class meeting, this is what your tuition costs you. So if you are going to skip class for whatever reason, do it for something that you get $105 worth of enjoyment from. And I said, now Iowans only pay 1/3 of this. So thank the non-resident classmates of yours for being so generous to the University of Iowa.
Chinese students started pouring into the U.S. after the 2008 financial crisis, when many universities started wooing them for revenue purposes.
The financial crisis caused a retraction in state revenues. So at the time of the financial crisis, the University of Iowa received about 50% of its funding from state taxes. And that amount has dropped to about 29% now. So that difference was made up by increasing the size of the university. And also within that, non-residents, so students from Chicago and Shanghai were paying 3 times the rate to come here in tuition than Iowa residents were.
Across America, universities adopted a similar strategy. From 2008 to 2018, the number of Chinese students in the U.S. more than quadrupled. China was the largest source of international students to American universities, making up 1/3 of the 1.1 million foreign students there. They generated about $14 billion in revenue for U.S. colleges. And perhaps an even bigger amount in intangible assets.
If you think of the United States and China as having the 2 largest economies in the world, that the future connections, the business and commercial connections between these 2 countries really is going to be the most important bilateral commercial relationship in coming decades. And so Chinese students who can speak English and know how American business works can benefit both sides and create stronger bonds of commerce and economics in the future.
But as tensions between the 2 countries heat up, Chinese students across America found themselves embroiled in the tussle.
The sparring between the United States and China has taken a new twist, with student visas now in the firing line. Beijing has accused Washington of racial discrimination after the visas of Chinese students and researchers were revoked.
Chinese who went to the U.S. to study, once seen as a great boon to America, are now often treated as saboteurs or spies.
今年有很多的像大一新生，他们都没有办法来，或者是他们的父母也很不愿意让他们来到美国，然后去学习。
The number of U.S. student visas granted to applicants in China came to just 808 in the 6 months through September, down 99% from over 90,000 in the same period a year earlier.
我们来这边留学，不光是单独在这边留学，我们还要每天关注实时的新闻、政策， 然后莫名其妙会某一天会出来一个政策，然后打乱你的计划。可能某一天政策来了以后就说，你要被取消掉了你的签证，那我们相当于就没有身份了，然后又回不来，相当于是大学上到马上快毕业了，然后最后又没办法毕业了，所以说很头疼的一件事情。
我的签证过期了，但是我在美国当地没有办法去补办。同时，如果我要是回国去 renew 我的 visa 的话，我现在就是需要在大使馆去预约，然后登记。但是这个现在是需要很长很长时间的。如果像我们这种情况，一旦回去没有及时的 renew I-20或者是 visa 的话，是没有办法再回到美国境内，然后继续完成学业的。
学费是普通当地的公民的学费会达到3倍这样的高，但是呢，我们享受的待遇和政策呢，完全就是2个不同的。
Being an international student is hard. You're a long way from home, you're from your parents, you're in a country that maybe speaks a different language, has different food, everything's different. And then to have this political pressure on top of that from the government of the United States and the government of China makes it more difficult.
你们国家跟国家打仗，不要再让我们学生好无辜呀。
These students are pursuing social science degrees, so they aren't subjected to as much scrutiny as their peers in the so-called STEM fields. Science, technology, engineering, and math students from China risk having their visas canceled over American fears of economic espionage.
I grew up in a medium-sized provincial city in China. Growing up in the provinces in China in the 90s, there was this conception that the best of China would leave China, whether it's manufactured products or students and young professionals. I arrived in Chicago on August 22nd, 2009. And then the next day, I came here to basically pay pilgrimage to the statue. This is the site of the first controlled self-sustained nuclear chain reaction. So literally, this was where humankind split the atom. And as a particle physicist, it was like where my profession originated from. It's designed by the British sculptor Henry Moore. And Henry Moore was a soldier in World War I. So he experienced firsthand the horrors of war and the use of chemical weapons. It's a very abstract shape, but it has a lot of meaning, right? It looks like a skull in a way, so it invokes horror. This is not a trophy. And it also looks like a mushroom cloud. It was a constant reminder of a scientist's civic duties to think about the social cost of our work, to think about the political implications. So US-China relations is at its lowest point since the establishment of diplomatic ties of the early 1970s. And it's something that horrifies me constantly. For the past 11 years and counting, I've been working on the Large Hadron Collider. It's a large international collaboration that spans dozens of countries, hundreds of institutions, and thousands of collaborators on each of its largest experiments. When I do my work, I do not think of myself as contributing to a single country. I think of myself as advancing human understanding of nature. And I think that's not unique among scientists. For a state, a government, to claim a piece of knowledge, to claim a field of science, that is both a fallacious notion and a dangerous misconception.
The White House has said that China is engaged in a wide-ranging and heavily resourced campaign to acquire sensitive United States technologies and intellectual property. The PRC authorities use some Chinese students mostly postgraduate students and postdoctorate researchers, to operate as non-traditional collectors of intellectual property. China, on its part, has a 1,000 Talents Plan, which is a government project to attract scientists, and in particular, ethnic Chinese scientists.
他们现在对在美国的这个华人科学家进行所谓的猎巫行动，任意的滋扰、抓捕中国的留学生。这些做法同当年的麦卡锡主义何其相似呢？美国政客这些政客的疯狂反共渲染实质的危险，实际上是企图用意识形态对抗来定义中美关系，掩盖其遏制中国的战略意图。
So whether it's the Chinese government or the US government or other governments in Europe and this and that, they all adopt a very similar techno-nationalistic rhetoric in saying that science is a tool of national greatness and we want talent recruitment to boost our national prestige and prosperity, blah, blah, blah. The important question that we need to ask is not how many scientists are in the US, how many scientists are in China, because that is still an attempt of drawing a border around a piece of knowledge and claiming it as being in ownership of a state. I think what the coronavirus pandemic should be teaching us is that nations and human bodies are all porous entities. So no country can enclave itself in a bubble and keep its citizens safe. We really need to be able to stop clinging to these old ideas of citizenship and greed, using these concepts of scarcity to justify our bigotry, to really be able to see and think about community beyond the confines of a state. We inhabit the same planet. We share the same cosmological history, and we are bound by the same fundamental laws of the universe. And our fates are connected on this surface of this planet that is shifting because of climate change. And if we do not have that kind of radical transformation with regards to how we organize our society, we are literally running out of time.
Companies around the world are bracing for a fallout from superpower rivalry. And no company has made more news than Huawei.
Huawei says that its supply chain is under attack from the United States.
Huawei has denied a British report accusing it of colluding with the Chinese government.
Despite claims and controversy surrounding the company, Huawei's campus, tucked away at the fringes of Shenzhen city, is an oasis of calm. Inside these medieval-themed office blocks, researchers work on the future of telecommunications technology.
We see so many countries that are completely unprepared for what installing 5G technology in their nationwide systems will do for their security. This is technology that the Chinese Communist Party will have access to this information. How they'll get it, when they'll get it, how much of it they'll decide to have access to, we can all debate. But make no mistake about it, they'll have the capacity to get at this deeply personal information.
The US has banned Huawei from its future 5G networks, and it has pressured its allies to do the same. Huawei's 5G network products are now banned in countries from UK to Poland to Sweden. Huawei was also added to Washington's entity list on national security concerns. This means the company cannot buy American software without US government approval, which means no more Google Android operating system for its phones.
各位同行的朋友，大家下午好。我们华为正经历一个 美国第3轮制裁的困难时期，美国制裁的开始，我们要更加大了力度来发展了我们的应用的生态，支撑了我们的鸿蒙的 OS， 哈姆尼 OS 以及我们的HMS， 来打造软硬件协同的双人驱动的全场景的智慧生态。在制裁的这种困难的情况下，我们还实现了2.4亿台，市场份额做全球的第2。那去年我们实现了收入4600多亿，今年上半年我们仍然实现了同比的增长。在今年这个这么更加困难的这个时期，我也在这个机会也感谢我们全球的消费者的支持、鼎力的支持和厚爱。没有大家的支持，在这3轮的打击下，我们仍然能够实现增长，否则无法取得这样的成绩。谢谢大家，谢谢，再次感谢。
Another company caught in the crosshairs of a tech war is TikTok.
Here's what would actually happen if TikTok got banned. First, people around the world would start to panic because TikTok is loved by millions. After that, you would see riots happening in America because people were so attached to TikTok.
If you haven't already downloaded it, TikTok is an app devoted to viral dance crazes, cat videos, and a whole load of teenage pranks. Can this app really be a high-tech spying application stealing your secrets on behalf of the communist regime, as many in Washington claim?
China is building its own internet focused on very different values. And it's now exporting their vision of the internet to other countries. Now, until recently, the internet in almost every country outside of China has been defined by American platforms with strong free expression values. But there's no guarantee that these values will win out. A decade ago, almost all of the major internet platforms were American. Today, 6 of the top 10 are Chinese. And we're beginning to see this in social media too. While our services like WhatsApp are used by protesters and activists everywhere due to strong encryption and privacy protections, on TikTok, the Chinese app growing quickly around the world, mentions of these same protests are censored, even here in the US. Is that the internet that we want? So this question of which nation's values are going to determine what speech is allowed for decades to come really puts into perspective our debates about the content issues of the day.
Critics have accused TikTok of scrubbing videos supportive of pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong and videos critical of the Chinese government's actions in Xinjiang. TikTok has denied both accusations.
前2天我在朋友圈里看到了一幅漫画，就是一条大路在入口处挂着一个美国的路牌，上面写着“自由市场”啊 ，TikTok 这样的企业像个小猪一样满怀希望，边吃草边往前走。可是他们不知道，当他们走到前面，走到尽头，养着膘肥体壮，等待他们的是什么呢？是山姆大叔拿着一把刀，准备屠宰他们。我觉得这幅漫画是目前中国在美国的企业处境一个生动的写照。美国政府呢，在拿不出任何证据的情况下，就对 TikTok 进行有罪推定。所以中国网友就说美国当局的这个吃相太难看了这个针对一家民营企业这个美国从总统到政府的各个部门，他们就像这个几只大老虎一样来张牙舞爪的围猎一个小兔子，所以全世界人都看在眼里，对这种美国这种巧取豪夺的行为是很不耻。所以人们不禁要问：美国一向标榜的自由市场、竞争中立、法治精神都到哪里去了？
Those who support the move against TikTok in Washington point out that YouTube, Google, and Facebook were banned in China long before any action against TikTok was taken.
I know a lot of people, my Chinese friends, will point to the Trump administration and say they started this trade war, or this tech trade war, or this tech Cold War. And in my view, it was actually the Chinese side that decided that for domestic stability reasons, the Chinese internet had to be separate from the global internet. By about 2010, 2011, 2012, I think the Chinese leadership realized, hey, there are some technologies that we don't want to let foreigners in on, and so we're going to start to squeeze them out. And it created a protected market for some Chinese brands that have done amazingly well, Alibaba and Tencent and WeChat. But for other US companies, they've been completely excluded from the market. And again, I think that was a push from the Chinese government to say, hey, we need to have two ecosystems, a Chinese one and a global one. And then I think the response of the Trump administration on what they've done on Huawei and in semiconductors in some ways is a natural one.
A tech war has casualties on both sides, and it is also going to cost the world dearly. A report from Deutsche Bank estimates the costs of the tech war at more than $3.5 trillion over the next 5 years. If the tech war continues unabated, this could be what the global tech infrastructure looks like. With rival internet platforms, telecom infrastructure regimes, CPU architectures, operating systems, satellite communication networks, IoT networks, and payment systems with very little interoperability or interaction. Countries and companies may have to choose between a US tech regime or a China tech regime, or they will simply have to bear the costs of running both.
The tech wall is a world where you have two sets of countries with two driving standards, whether it's how you compute with PCs, how you communicate with handsets, and everything that goes around electronically, you start to have two standards itself.
To strip out one technology is very painful and expensive. For example, asking a nation like Germany to strip out Huawei from their network would cost tens of billions of euros, delaying infrastructure build and hurting job creation. But staying the course would ensure a strong diplomatic reaction from the US with unforeseen outcomes. For corporates, it would mean having two different communication and networking standards across countries to ensure interoperability. Product design would be a lot more challenging, as they would no longer be able to design once and sell everywhere without incurring additional costs of complying with two different standards.
When you have the countries saying that you could only have one if you're functioning in my environment, so companies and institutions who has to work on those will have to find a way to either have two architectures and two set of gadgets. The same would go to its handsets. Will users have to have two different phones, one which uses WeChat and one which uses Gmail, and that's a freak scenario, which can actually be realistic at some point. One thing which will be certain if that happens is costs. Costs will go up in doing business.
This is Tesla's Gigafactory in Shanghai. Built with $1.6 billion in loans from Chinese banks. Construction of this factory started in 2018, and electronic vehicles, or EVs, made here started shipping in December 2019 to the Chinese market. Case in point that proves American businesses, despite political pressures, can't ignore the size of the world's second largest market.
China is already the biggest EV market in the world. So for Tesla, it makes sense to penetrate in this market and tap into the purchasing potential of the world's largest middle class.
In a way, Tesla has Trump to thank. Due to US pressure, China has allowed Tesla to be the first car plant in China to operate without a local partner. It is wholly foreign-owned, and the plant has paid off well for Tesla. It sold more than 50,000 cars in China in the first 6 months of 2020. But as the tech war between the US and China deepens, US companies will be increasingly scrutinized in the technology they are using inside their China factory. In July 2020, Elon Musk made clear how he would deal with this.
I really want to emphasize it's a lot that we are going to be doing original engineering in China. So it's not just converting sort of stuff built in America to work in China. We will be doing original design and engineering in China.
With original engineering, Tesla China creates original IP that will not be subjected to future US sanctions. Political risks loom large. Yet scores of American companies, big and small, continue to flock to China to do business. Many of them come to Shenzhen, known as the Silicon Valley of China. Shenzhen, and not New York, was also the world's best performing stock market in 2020. One American company with operations here is Hacks, a startup accelerator from the US that also offers venture funding. Hacks has a portfolio of more than 200 startups from sectors like smartphone devices, Internet of Things, robotic kits, and medical devices.
We have our office in Silicon Valley, and San Francisco and Shenzhen actually kind of work together in order to get teams to their next stage of development. So when teams come to Shenzhen, they're often working on their engineering, their technology, and then when they go to San Francisco, they're often working on their business development and getting investment and starting to scale up their business from a financial standpoint.
TensorField is a company funded by Hacks.
I'm the CEO and co-founder of TensorField Agriculture, originally from the UK, but our company is based in the US, in California. We're building a robot which is going to be for farms. It's an agricultural robot, so farmers are our customers, and we're killing weeds for them without herbicides.
Chang's robot kills weeds by spraying hot oil on it.
The world spends $27 billion on herbicides every year. And unfortunately, their overuse has created these herbicide-resistant weeds, which are becoming more and more difficult to kill, and they really threaten the future of our food security. So in order to make sure that we have a future where we can grow food safely and sustainably, we need solutions like this to be in the world.
Is it not possible to build it in a factory in the US or UK, where you're from?
It's possible. So in the US, we looked at quotes. For example, that part on my desk there. A quote for that in a factory in the US would be several $1,000s, and then they'd probably quote you a lead time of maybe 2-3 weeks, and that's really fast for over there. This same piece, we can get it back in 3 days from a factory here, and for less than $100.
There is one place that is central to startups with Hacks, and that's Huaqiangbei, the biggest electronics market in the world.
We're in Shenzhen, Huaqiangbei, and this is an electronics market here. So yeah, let's go check it out. Huaqiangbei, it's like, they call it the Mecca of hardware. I'm looking for a particular type of microcontroller, for example, that I need to prototype with. I can come down here and there's like a really wide selection. Oftentimes, if it's not actually on display, so I don't speak Chinese, but the people here are so willing to bridge the gap in communication. They just want to help out. So what I can do is show them a part number. Often, if they don't have it, they can speak around and like call around to some of their friends that do. And you'll often be like waiting here for a couple of minutes, someone runs off, and then like, in 5 minutes time, they've come back with exactly the component that you need. So it's really incredible being here.
Huaqiangbei is where you can find the parts that make up smartphones and TV and tablets. This is where many of the world's selfie sticks and hoverboards come from. All the tools you need to build anything you want. And once you find it, you can get that component in 1 hour, and you can order 1,000 of it.
We're prototyping, we're testing on our benches. It's so easy for us to, say, plug in power the wrong way round. And once we do that, we get what's called the blue smoke. So one of our chips on our board can just explode, it fries, and then you get blue smoke going through the air. And at that point, if you're anywhere else in the world, you think, oh my God, I've got to order this online, a replacement chip, and it will take a few days to arrive. Instead, here, we can just walk downstairs, like 2 floors down in this building, find that chip from a market stall downstairs, and then continue our work straight away. So being able to iterate in hours rather than waiting for days and days, I think it's really true what they say is a month in Shenzhen is similar to 4 months anywhere else in the world.
Shenzhen, especially from engineering or technical standpoint, it's almost like the center of everything that's made in the physical world. I think within a few hours radius, you have the majority of all the world's electronics, plastics, really anything that's physically made is within Shenzhen's reach. The scale and expertise in supply chain that exists here doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So ultimately, when we started investing in hardware and products and these types of robotics and IoT, the answer was always, we have to be in Shenzhen.
Shenzhen is China's intellectual property center. According to the United Nations World Intellectual Property Organization, China accounted for nearly half of global patent filings in 2018, with a record 1.54 million applications, led by telecoms and computer technology. The United States ranked a distant second, with nearly 600,000 patent applications. According to the Chinese media, Shenzhen serves as the home base for more than half of the country's patent applicants.
The common misconception of even China is that it's a big factory, right? In reality, there's a lot of expertise, knowledge, understanding. I've lived in the States, and it's a very different feeling, right? If you come here, everybody's just moving as fast as they possibly can. And I would say, I mean, there's always going to be economics up and downs, but the underlying drive that's happening in the culture of China right now is going to continue to advance new opportunities and new growth that I think we're just not even seeing coming yet.
IP theft. It's one of the chief concerns of the US. But is China still a clone factory? In China's manufacturing hub, DONGGUAN, evidence shows that the US campaign to contain China's rise is in fact spurring its industries to accelerate design and invention. An hour away from the Shenzhen downtown is Sivga, a company making headphones. You may not have heard of them, but Sivga has had rave reviews from audiophiles in Europe and the US. Their headphones feature handcrafted wooden ear cups and intricately detailed metal grills. The man behind Sivga is Zhou Jian, who has done work overseeing production for global brands like Sennheiser, Sony, and Bose for 17 years.
我接触的这个客户给的案件很多。 这其中有很多都是国外提供的那个客户提供的那些 idea， 因为我记得发现他们的 idea 总有很多的特点，令我很震撼。真的是他们的很有创意，很有灵感。以我们的这边的，因为这边中国这边当时在创意这个路上还没走在这一块，所以呢，我很感受到他的这个创意各方面的。然后做到我完成这一块之后。 然后我是慢慢的去积累啊，然后吸收啊、消化啊，看看他们的其中的特点啊、优点啊，我能不能如果是我来做的话，我能不能在这个基础上，我会把它做得更好，会去超越它，或者再创新一个更好。
Zhou Jian is now giving his old bosses a run for their money. Not only has Sivga been doing well in global competitions, its headphones are also far cheaper compared to its bigger brand counterparts. US leaders have been harping the IP theft issue. Zhou acknowledges that was indeed the case a decade ago, but not anymore.
10年之前吧，在中国很多有一大部分都是在这个山寨高仿这样的一个过程，因为每一个国家也好，公司也好。 它从零开启的东西呢，它必须要有一个模仿，然后一个吸收、消化、应用，然后超越就是一个创新上面去了。特别是深圳已经走完了那一段路了，已经在创新的这个路上。 所以我们的公司，因为我们以前也积累了那么多的经验啊，然后我们开公司的时候也在往这个创新路上走，因为以前的路已经走过了。
Whether it's through hard work, sheer genius, technology theft, or a combination of all three, China is now a global tech powerhouse. As of 2019, it has more unicorns than the US. Unicorns are privately held startup companies valued at over $1 billion. They are such a statistical rarity, hence the reference to the mythical animal. China has 206 such firms, while the US has 203. Globally, there are 494 unicorns. China is also doubling down on its spending on research. The National People's Congress unveiled a 5-year plan in which China will invest close to $1.4 trillion in building new infrastructure through AI, data centers, 5G, the industrial internet, and other new technologies. Chinese policymakers especially seek to reduce their country's dependence on the US for semiconductors. In October 2019, Beijing established a $29 billion semiconductor fund. David Li is one of the men in Shenzhen most interviewed by international media. His annual calendar is booked up with talks all over the world. He runs Shenzhen Open Innovation Lab, which is an incubator space, and he is the go-to person on anything about the tech business in Shenzhen.
Here's a picture. I like to get started with the talk. This is a real device you can find in China. This is a facial recognition enabled public toilet paper dispenser. Again, facial recognition toilet paper dispenser for public restroom. This is a real device. It's growing very fast in China.
Why do you need that?
So, here's a good question. If you look at all the Western media, this is the reason. China is such a paranoia country, such a totalitarian surveillance dictatorship. They want to know every single minute of what the people are doing. And this is the pictures. You get the Western media try to paint China in terms of this crazy Hollywood Marvel universe villains. We just try to have this tight control. So, and of course, the police state. This is the narrative you will be getting. And then, of course, when you see a contraction like facial recognition public toilet dispensers, that's what people keep thinking about. It's like, oh my God, this is the worst. This is the worst device on earth. This is government intrusion of personal privacy. But here's the reality. The reason this machine is popular is not because it's driven by some political agenda. It's actually solving a very real problem. This is reality. This is the reality of life in China. These people in their 60s, they lived through the worst time in China. So when you grow up in that area at that time, there is a survival instinct. Any public resource you can get your hand on, you will try to grab as much as possible. And when the facial recognition becomes viable, it becomes the most intuitive, the most natural way to solve this problem. Right now, we are pretty much building billion-dollar industry out of these things across China. It's a country of 1.4 billion, so we got a lot of public bathroom.
The facial recognition toilet paper dispenser is just one of a huge range of AI tech widely adopted in China today. AI is being used to control traffic in hundreds of smart cities. It is used in factories, in restaurants, at ports, and in data centers. And the US alleges that AI is also being used in Xinjiang to suppress Uyghur minorities. China is fast closing the technological gap with America. And though it may not match US capabilities across the board, it will soon be one of the leading powers in AI. Here's why, according to David Li.
China is going to win in terms of the AI war, it's not because there's a better research here. It's not because there's a more cutting-edge technology here. It's China is one of the best places to experiment with AI without prejudice, without any kind of philosophical discussions. Do it, if it works, people buy it, that's a reason for it to exist. If it doesn't, then the system dies. So right now there are literally tens of thousands or hundreds of companies around China taking mature AI technology and try to make application out of it.
I believe that AI is a function of two things. It's essentially is fancy statistical science, which has become relevant in the last few years because of, one, the availability of data, big data globally, and second is essentially the linearity of Moore's law, how fast and how cheap it is to process things. So I think the crux here is not AI. It's data as well as speed and how you process it. And China has an advantage in data, definitely, but the US is leaps ahead in semiconductors and quantum computing. And I think that's the way you have to measure this.
China and the US are bracing for a long-term tech rivalry, one that will likely not change course with a Biden presidency.
I think the current area of competition and confrontation and conflict with China will outlast the Trump administration. Some of the issues, particularly around technology and technology ecosystems, are ones that will be with us for years to come.
新中国成立70多年，我们什么大风大浪、枪林弹雨没有见过。历史上，美国没少给我们进行各种围堵、制裁，我们也都挺过来，而且道路越走越宽广，前途越来越光明。
In the next episode, increased tensions in the South China Sea stoke fears of a hot war between US and China in ASEAN's backyard.
In a hot war scenario, we have no choice because we are right in the middle of it.